fact, if we just turn, that's probably in Judges chapter 6, they were in a miserable state. It says that every time that they would plant crops, the enemy would come. So it says in Judges chapter 6, starting in verse 1, it says, "Again the Israelites did evil in the eyes of the Lord." Okay, so that was the beginning of the problem. So they disobeyed, and so God sent some problems to them to get their attention. And it says, "And for 7 years he gave them into the hand of the Midianites." So the Midianites were the bad guys. 7 years. It says, "Because the power of Midian was so oppressive, the Israelites prepared shelters for themselves in mountain clefts, caves, and strongholds." So they were hiding out. It says, "Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples invaded the country. They camped in the land, and they ruined the crops all the way to Gaza, and did not spare a living thing for Israel, neither sheep nor cattle nor donkeys." So they were going out and they wiped out their crops. You try planting something, they'll trample it down. If they see a sheep, they'll kill it. So the Israelites were like hiding these things. They'd have to like plant their crops in a cave or something, you know, and hope that enough sunlight came in to make them grow. Maybe grow potatoes. They were pretty desperate. And then it says, let's see, they came with their livestock and their tents like swarms of locusts. It was impossible to count the men and their camels. They invaded the land to ravage it. Midian was so impoverished that the Israelites, that they cried out to the Lord for help. And so, so then the Lord spoke to Midian. Well, he first sent him a prophet and said, "You're this way because you did wrong." But, and then, in verse 13, the angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak of Oprah and spoke to Gideon. And he was, said to him, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." And Gideon says, "What? But sir, if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened?" And then later he says, "How can I," in verse 15, "how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least of my family." And then the Lord answers in 16, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites together." So Midian is doubting it. It's like, man, we've been oppressed for 7 years. I'm just a normal, weak guy, the smallest in my family. And then, so he builds this altar, and then in verse 36, it says, Gideon said to God, "If you will save Israel by my hand as you have promised," he's looking around, he says, "Look, I will place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. If there is dew only on the fleece and all the ground is dry, then I will know that you will save Israel by my hand as you have said." And then it says, and this is what happened. Gideon rose the next day and squeezed the fleece and wrung out the dew, a whole bowl full of water. So that's a lot of water. You know, it's not just like a little bit of dew, a bowl full, you know, on a small fleece. That's a lot of water. And then he says, well, you know, maybe that was an accident. Maybe there was water bubbling up underneath that I didn't see. You know, who knows? So he says, "Don't be angry with me. Just let me try once more. Allow me one more time to test with the fleece. This time make the fleece dry and the ground around it covered with dew." So we just want to make sure that it wasn't a fluke or an accident or something. And it says, that night God did so. Only the fleece was dry, and all the ground was covered with dew. So this then was a test. So some people use the word fleece, but really it was providing God a test. And I think I shared with you before a fleece that I've used at one point. So I had prayed, and Micaiah, I think we talked about this last Sunday at dinner or something, right? God gave me the name Micaiah, and it kind of just happened as I was walking up the hall. I didn't know.
No, that was at the baby shower.
Yeah. At the baby shower, and I said, well, is that really? And then I prayed, okay, Lord, you know, if Emmy's car is washed today, then that will confirm that this is really what you want. And came home, and the car was washed, you know, the first time in all of our marriage that she had washed the car, and she was pregnant, about to give birth. So I was like, wow, what's the chance of that happening? Pretty slim. Mm-hmm. So God confirmed that to me. So that's an example of using a fleece. So a fleece is used to confirm a word. If God speaks to you, it's used to say, is this something that I should do? Now, it should be noted that a couple things about fleeces. First of all, you can never use a fleece to do something that first doesn't pass the test of, would God tell me to do that? Like, for instance, you couldn't say, well, God, give me the fleece, you know, make this happen if you want me to go rob the grocery store because I'm low on money, right? You know that God doesn't want us to steal, so that would be totally out. God didn't speak that to you. So don't even bother with going the fleece, but people do that sometimes. We'll think, well, I don't know, did God really say this to me? Well, you know, if it doesn't first pass the test of something that God can and would say, don't even consider the fleece part. The fleece can be a confirmation. Now, the second point to note is that God may not answer your request for the fleece, but that doesn't mean that God doesn't want you to do what He told you to do. So here, He gave Gideon this chance and said, okay, I'll do that for you. And sometimes He does. Other times, He doesn't. So the lack of a fleece being fulfilled doesn't mean not to do it. Okay? Because a fleece or a test is just a confirmation of the positive. It's not a denial of what you're asking about. Because God simply may say no to your fleece. You know, because, you know, you make something crazy. God says to you, I want you to, like for instance, God told us to move to Atlanta. And, you know, if I came up with a fleece like, okay, God, if this is really you, give me $1 million.
What? No, teach me how to fly.
Teach me how to fly, yes. It's like, okay, God's not interested in doing that, and He'll say no to that fleece, but He still wants me to go to Atlanta. So, you know, we would also need to pick something that God would be pleased to do, because He may say no to that choice of fleece. The second item is that of lots. So a lot is sometimes of the form of drawing straws. You know, if you remember Jonah, when he was on the boat and it was about to go down,